What's going on, everybody? So today I am about to do a review that I have been looking forward to for quite some time now. As many of you may have known, talking about in previous videos, my most anticipated film of the year was Robert Eggers' The Northman, and I saw it opening night, and I haven't had the chance to shoot the review yet. Going into finals week with school and everything, things have been kind of nuts. So I finally am getting the chance to sit down and talk about this film. And as many of you who watch my channel frequently know, I am a huge Robert Eggers fan. Lighthouse is probably my favorite A24 produced film. It's my favorite film from Robert Eggers and probably still is after The Northman. I'll have to rewatch it a few times to cement it 100%, but I love the way Robert Eggers makes films. He has such a passion for these very specific period pieces. And when The Northman was announced, obviously going into Nordic lore and looking at Vikings through this specific lens, I was really excited and also kind of nervous. Eggers is someone who's worked with A24 for both films in his career, working with a limited budget, utilizing what he had at his disposal, and now being with a larger production company and given a much more expansive budget. I was worried that with this film, he might sacrifice elements of himself in this because he was given more of a budget. Maybe there'd be more studio interference, and to my pleasant surprise, none of that happened. This is still a unique 100% Robert Eggers vision, and I am thrilled that I enjoyed this as much as I did. The Northman is directed by Robert Eggers. Prince Amleth is on the verge of becoming a man when his father is brutally murdered by his uncle who kidnaps the boy's mother. 2 decades later, Amleth is now a Viking who's on a mission to save his mother, kill his uncle, and avenge his father. So in talking about this film's plot specifically, this isn't anything unheard of to most people. You could compare this to Hamlet. It's obviously based on works of literature, this very simple revenge story. But what makes this such a uniquely Eggers film is how heavily focused it is on the lore surrounding Norse mythology and really building on these characters and their power dynamics and how culture directly impacts these people and in their actions specifically. So the first thing I want to talk about with this film, because it is a Robert Eggers movie, is the cinematography. One of the things that I have been blown away with in every single one of Eggers' films, which I talked about a while back. I talked about The Witch and the Lighthouse in a Robert Eggers specific video that I'll put a link to, but he's worked with the same cinematographer on all of his films, and it just goes to show how powerful the camera can be in conveying the specific messages in his films. And this movie is no exception. The camera work in this is beautiful. Scenic shots outdoors are incredible. The attention to detail in each specific shot is just absolutely incredible. With his budget, I was worried that that might be sacrificed to an extent and that this would just be a much more, brutal, in-your-face action film. And it's not. Eggers did not sacrifice anything that makes him such a unique filmmaker. This movie is brutal, it's very violent, but it all has a purpose and there's a reason for it. And the camera really works to the film's advantage in showing brutality. There's a scene very early on in the film where Amleth, Alexander Skarsgård's character, is with this group of guys and they're attacking this village. He's going through the town and he's walking through and it's really slow and methodical, not super violent. And these people are moving these women and children into the shed. And I believe it was in the trailer, but it just shows a guy light the corner of the shed and all these people inside screaming. And it was so unique to me to see that scene in particular because it shows Eggers looking at this culture through a very neutral lens for the most part. He shows the brutality and evil that these people were capable of, but he also shows the beauty in the religion and the connectivity that it brought to the people and the joy and the horror. And it's really this very interesting look into Norse mythology and how these people worship these specific deities and the repercussions of worshiping certain deities, crazy sacrifice rituals, and that's all displayed through the cinematography. There's a lot about the culture that if you're not super familiar with it that obviously it might leave you to question some of it, and it's definitely worth looking into the Norse culture because it's super fascinating. The mythos is just so deep and lush and vibrant, and he spends a lot of time exploring certain elements but not really giving you ham-fisted expositional dialogue. It's very much through his love of history and wanting to convey this plot. But I personally think that even if you strip away all that really unique mythos and history and lore of this religion, that it's still a really intense and immersive experience that any viewer can enjoy, even if you're not a scholar in Norse mythology. So the second thing I want to talk about is the performances. Alexander Skarsgård in this film is just absolutely unbelievable. The brutality in his performance and the intensity of the revenge that he wants for the death of his father is just conveyed so incredibly, not only through his dialogue and his just these loud screams that are so guttural that he gives through the film, but just through his facial expressions and the things that he's willing to do and to put himself at risk to get this revenge that he feels that his father so justly deserves. And it's one of my favorite performances I've seen of the year so far. He just is completely and totally committed to this role, and I was so thrilled to see that because I've always liked Skarsgård a lot whenever I've seen him in films. Thought he was really great in Melancholia, just things throughout his career that I've always enjoyed him in. But this really showed me just how incredible of an actor that he is, transforming himself completely for this role, and it was amazing. Anya Taylor-Joy, as most of you know, I've talked about her on my channel multiple times. She's one of my favorite actresses working in Hollywood now. She is incredible in this movie. She is not the central focal point by any means, but while she is in the film, she gives such an amazing performance. There's just something about when she's on screen, she's so commanding of the audience, and the way that she commits herself to these roles. I mean, you look at Eggers' first piece, The Witch, which really kind of set her career on its trajectory, and she's so great at these period piece films, and I was really appreciative of her performance. Ethan Hawke, even though he's barely in this film, is fantastic. Willem Dafoe, Nicole Kidman, Björk, for the brief moment that she's in this film, is phenomenal. Just every character actor in this movie does such a phenomenal job at committing to the performance. And it's great because I recently watched a really immersive behind the scenes interview with all the cast and crew and with Robert Eggers about this film. And one of the best parts of it was listening to Willem Dafoe talk about seeing The Witch in theaters, wanting to work with Eggers because of just how incredible the experience was, and then working with Eggers on The Lighthouse and coming to work on The Northman as well. And he said the best part about these films is how dedicated to the material that Eggers is, getting it period accurate and making sure that the information that he's conveying is done to the best degree possible. And you can just see that in every frame of this film, that he wanted to convey this specific period in history and portray this very specific culture in a way that shows it in a positive light and a negative light and everything that surrounds that in general. And I think that's so cool. I mean, it's the same thing with The Witch. The Witch looks at the horrors of religion and the way that those people in that time period were treated. And then you look at The Lighthouse, which looks at these lighthouse keepers in a very specific period in history, the traumas they would have to overcome, the psychological damage of being isolated on this island for a long period of time. And what I like about Eggers is that each one of these projects has these really deeply disturbing psychological elements amidst this historical, beautiful art that he's creating. And I think that the two are balanced so incredibly well. And he gets that because of his performers. And the people in this film just 100% give it their all, and it is amazing. Last thing I want to talk about in real detail is the score. This is the first film that Eggers has not worked with Mark Corvin, so I was a little worried because I really love the Mark Corvin scores to both The Lighthouse and The Witch, but this film has a fantastic score, and I'm sure that he wanted to work with people who were more familiar with this time period. Maybe Corvin, doesn't have as much experience with music of the Norse culture, but it is really incredibly well done. It's brutal, it's intense, it really gets you so immersed in this environment and makes you just feel like you're there. It's heart-poundingly exciting when it's going through these action sequences. It just enhances the brutality. The violence in this film is so intense and just non-stop. But aside from all that, it's just a really great character story, and looking at this idea of revenge through a lens of, really, is it worth it? Is you going and doing this for your family and your father in particular worth it, and examining, his mother's psyche behind this situation and why she made the decisions that she's made through her life and how that's impacted her. It was so interesting that, in a lot of these revenge tales, it's such a very straightforward and just like, hey, this is what it is. Character will go get revenge and movie will end. And this is so much more layered, leaving the audience to question at one point whether this revenge is even valid. Is he doing it for the right reasons? Is he just going off blind faith that what his father said is accurate and that he needs to get his revenge if he was unjustly murdered? And that made it even more interesting to me. So The Northman as a whole is just an incredible experience. It's definitely one that I would recommend watching in the theater. I think this just proves to me that Eggers, as a filmmaker, can do no wrong. If the studio can just stay out of what he wants to do and let him just make these films to the degree and the caliber that he wishes to make them, I think he's going to continue to put out movies that shock and awe audiences. I look at a film like The Lighthouse, which is so reminiscent of like an Ingmar Bergman film as far as like cinematography, performance driven in a very small scale environment. And then you look at something like this that's just so blown up and huge as far as its scale, with the landscapes and the environment and everything that this film has to offer, and he's still able to execute these really intimate human stories amidst this immersive environment with a much larger budget. And that's really exciting to me, because I know, as far as reading things that he's interested in online, I know he wants to do this Nosferatu film that I think Anya Taylor-Joy has been casted in, but I'm not sure how much other information's been revealed. And I know that he released an article last week sometime where he was talking about really being interested in the Elizabethan time era, and that he's been listening to a lot of music at home and it's been driving his wife nuts. But he said he is absolutely not interested in ever making a film in current time period, and I think that's really fascinating, and I look forward to whatever he does next. He's one of my favorite filmmakers working right now, and this is my glowing recommendation to go see this movie immediately. So have you seen The Northman? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. I obviously thought this movie was incredible. I think it's going to be top tier contender for one of the best of the year. There's just no other experience like seeing an Eggers film in theaters. The balance between really brutal violence with sometimes over-the-top comedy, some moments that just leave your jaw dropped to the floor, shocking. And this is a movie I won't forget anytime soon. As always, if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always looking for new content to review, going through streaming services, watching new films that are released. And I really like the interactiveness with you guys, the audience, and letting me know what types of films you'd like me to review, because I have in mind a good amount of time the types of movies I'd like to review for you, but I always like to hear from you, and I'm excited to hear what you want me to review. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.